Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand why are workers across the country protesting against the government. Now, the reason why we have picked up this article is very clear. On last week, that is on April the 13th, thousands of workers, they spontaneously took streets on different places in Noida and they were protesting against lack of hike in their minimum wages. Now, this protest is not just unique to Noida. It has happened in many industrial cities in India, like Manesar of Gurgaon, like Surat, like even Barauni refinery in the state of Bihar. So what is the reason behind this protest? This is what we are going to find out. Now, the immediate trigger behind all of those protests can be stemmed to one particular fact, that few days back in the state of Haryana, after the protest which happened in Manesar, the Haryana government increased the minimum wages of workers in the state of Haryana. So the workers in UP now wanted the same. Additionally, these workers have been subjected to strong inflationary pressures which has been created due to the Iran-US war in the Gulf region, right? Similarly, as this protest highlight, there are many structural weaknesses in the labor regulation in India which may have caused problems for the laborers. So in our today's video, we'll first try to understand how this minimum wage is calculated and how lack of inflation indexing of this minimum wages led to protest of workers. But in addition to that, we'll also try to understand what are the various structural weaknesses in the labor regulation in India which might have led to the workers' grievances. Now, the notes which I will be using in our today's session, you can also download them because these are very important for your exams. And you can go to the Telegram channel, ATS Live, for that. While you are downloading the notes from this channel, please do not forget to subscribe to it as well. Okay, so let us start by understanding what is a minimum wage. Minimum wage is a wage declared by every state government below which any industry can't pay to its workers. So they can pay at least the minimum wage or more than it. Now, to calculate minimum wages, you need to understand minimum wage has two components. First is a base wage, which is a fixed component of wage, and ideally, not really, ideally it should be revised once every 5 years by the respective state governments. The second component is a variable component which accounts for cost of living allowances, popularly called as a dearness allowance. To calculate dearness allowance, usually it is linked to consumer price index of industrial workers, which is published by the Labor Bureau with a base year of 2016. As you can understand, the consumer price index has various components. CPI rural, urban and combined is published by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, particularly the National Statistical Office. Other components like CPI rural labor, CPI agricultural labor and CPI industrial workers, these are the index compiled by Labor Bureau, right? Now, ideally, to revise the wages according to the inflation, ideally it should be revised twice a year to reflect inflation changes. Now, why despite such provisions the minimum wages have not been inflation indexed? Let us now understand this. Now, what you have to understand here, although many states they carry out the half-year revision of dearness allowances, but many states, including Haryana and UP, they have failed to revise the wage or the base component of this minimum wage. And as a result, as you can understand, Haryana revised this wage after this protest after 10 years, and UP, it revised this base component of the wage last in 2012, which means the latest revision done after the protest have been done after a period of 14 years. So what does it show you? That these delays have become more prominent, which have been aggravated since COVID-19 pandemic, leading to worsening of the revision of wages for the workers. Now, this created a situation where the spending of the workers as far as purchase of goods and services and daily needs is concerned, that has risen because of inflation, but their earnings in form of wages have not revised according to the indexes as proposed by the government, and this creates a hardship for the workers in order to meet their day-to-day spending requirements, and this is the immediate trigger of protest. But as I told you, there are multiple different triggers as well. So let us understand this. Now, the reason why I told you the wages of the workers have not matched the inflation levels, I have data which I need to explain to you. I have tabulated this inflation percentage in different parts of Delhi NCR, that is Haryana, Gurgaon and Faridabad. For Uttar Pradesh, it is Ghaziabad and Gautam Budh Nagar, where Noida is located. So you can understand, on an average, the inflation has risen more than 27%. But on the other hand, the wage growth, which should have revised according to the inflation levels, have not kept the match. And as a result, there is a gap in the wage as well as inflation levels. And this mismatch that I've shown you in this these red highlighted portions, it shows that the wage growth is lagging behind inflation, and as a result, there has been a decline in real purchasing power of the workers. So for every 100 rupee that they earn now, they are able to procure less goods and services from that same rupee. Why? The prices of goods and services have increased more, but their wages have not kept up paces with them. Right? So this is the first reason, that is lack of inflation indexing of wages. Now let us understand why this problem became so much prominent in the month of March and April 2026. Now this impact has been worsened in recent times because of several industrial units. They have been facing pressures. They have started to face pressures because of rising input cost, that is a result of war, as well as imposition of US tariffs, which ultimately was the largest export market of India. So all of this has resulted to industrial hardship, and therefore industries, they have delayed the wage payments of their employees, which adds to the uncertainties they were facing. First uncertainty is that the timely payment of wages have not happened, and the second level of uncertainty is that workers now are unsure whether they will be able to keep their jobs because the hardships faced by the industry. And as a result, this pinch of West Asia war has been felt by factory workers. On one hand, they have uncertainties associated with their payment and employment, and on another hand, their spendings have increased. The cost of their spendings have increased. As you can realize, there was LPG shortage in India, so many workers, who by the way are migrants, are required to spend more money in order to get those LPG cylinders from black markets. Similarly, the rent that they pay on the places that they live, the rent cost has increased, so has the cost of food inflation, right? So all of this accounts to the increased vulnerability of workers, which also is the cause of protest. Similarly, you need to understand 2 years back, the government brought 4 labor codes, which was consolidating basically 44 previous laws that were responsible for labor regulation. Right now, these 4 codes include code on wages, social security, industrial relation, occupational safety, health and working conditions. Right now, this code was initially brought by the government so as to benefit both employers as well as employees. For employers, it is expected to ease regulation and compliance norms, and on the other hand, for employees, it is there to ensure uniform wage structure as well as provision of social security for the workers. But instead, as these laws were passed in the parliament, their necessary rules have not been either notified by the central government or the state governments. So the expectations of workers of higher pay and better social security in reality even today has not materialized. Now, when this labor code was bought, many workers were of the opinion that their minimum wages would at least become 20,000 rupees. And the reason for this confusion was because Union government notified in September 2024 that 20,358 rupees per month would be a minimum wage which is applied to central workers working in the central companies, right? So the workers thought that this would also lead to increase in wages in their respective states, which the many governments like UP have clarified is not going to happen. So first, the expectation of the workers were high, but in reality, the reality did not meet the expectations. Similarly, as I told you, final rules of these labor codes were to be brought by respective central and state governments, because the codes provide for a broader outlook, but in reality, these rules will be done by the executives of the respective governments. Now, they not being notified yet by the central or state governments, and only draft rules exist, which causes uncertainty to these workers. Now, new codes, although they allow increase of workday up to 12 hours in order to facilitate a 4-day work week, because these laws have fixed that 48 hours is maximum working hours for any labor. Now, but the government on the other hand also wants to increase flexibility. So they have thought that if you provide 4-day workforce, you can keep people working for 12 hours. Now, many workers feel that this kind of a provision without any adequate safeguards can lead to exploitation of the workers, particularly in sectors like IT. And that is why, because these rules have not been notified by the union or the state government, there is a lack of clarity on working hours, rest intervals and spread over time. And that is why this adds to the grievances of the workers. Now, normally, what workers would expect that if there is a higher flexibility, there should also be a certainty in terms of overtime pay. But this code is silent on overtime pay. Therefore, workers feel that flexibility without adequate safeguards may lead to longer working hours, which would put increased workload of them and without any proportional and compensatory payment. Similarly, states are yet to frame their own rules, which might even lead to regional disparities. And when differences in working condition, differences in salaries exist, both the employers and employees will be facing a lot of confusion, and normally in the process workers would be represented by their union groups. But as most recently these rules have been codified, these codes actually say that if there are multiple unions in a particular workplace, only one union needs to be recognized. So what this provision means, that the workers and the representation by the union groups will now face less recognition, and therefore their negotiating power with the companies, with the management of the companies, now stands to benefit the companies and not the workers. So these traditional ways of expressing your grievances, which were available to the workers before, now they are not available. So when they are not available, the only cause these workers have is to protest against the government. And sometimes, as you can see recently what happened, these protests might lead to violence and larceny, right? So the moot point of our today's discussion is how can be things made better, and we have solutions for that. For example, you need to standardize the base revisions. What was the source of the problem? The base revision formula is given that you have to revise it once every 5 years. But did the government do that? The answer is no. So you have to make sure that the revision of the base minimum wages is made mandatory and automatic across all states in order to prevent these decade-long stagnation in wages. Similarly, the alignment of the wages with respect to inflation through CPI industrial worker, they need to be updated more frequently. Presently, this is happening twice every 1 year, that is once every 6 months. So you need to make it more frequent, once every quarter, that is of 3 months, or once every 2 months. So this might help workers to get their more salaries with respect to increase inflation. Another suggestion that I have is that you need to institutionalize the bargaining of the workers with respect to the industries themselves. As I told you earlier, they had the recourse of having their trade unions bargain for them. But since these newer codes actually dilute the power of trade unions, they have no other option but to vent their anger in the government, right? So this grievances needs to be settled at the negotiating table rather than bringing out on the streets, and for that recognition of labor unions can play a very important role. Now you need to understand labor unions are a two-edged swords. If you want to take care of the workers, you need to give them the right to organize themselves or to unionize themselves, which by the way is a part of Article 19 of the Constitution. Similarly, the moot point of the problem is that the government, although had good intentions in bringing these labor codes, but they have not been operationalized yet. So what you need to do, you need to urgently notify the final rules in order to eliminate confusion regarding 12-hour shifts, regarding overtime payment, right? So the uncertainty needs to be reduced. You need to be more proactive in wage revision, and you need to also let workers organize themselves, unionize themselves in order to provide them a way where they can vent out their grievances through a formal channel, and it would not lead to spilling of the protest outside in the public and in the streets. So there is a fixed way of do that, and you should let that happen, right? So this is what we wanted to discuss. Now, before we move forward and solve 2 UPSC PYQs, there is an important announcement. The topic which we dealt with is an integral part of UPSC economy, how wages are revised, what indexes are used, etc., etc. Now, to take admissions in all of our, or to take or have an understanding in all of the subjects which are important for UPSC, you can consider taking admissions in one of our resolution P2I batches. In P2I batches, as the name suggests, from prelims to mains to interview, everything will be covered. So not just economy, but also important subjects like polity, history, geography, lesser important subjects like IR, security, society, ethics will be covered in a thorough manner. In addition to that, when you're studying important concepts, it's natural for you to have doubts. So to help you solve doubts, there is also mentorship support, which is bundled with this P2I courses, right? So to take admissions, go to our website. There's an important code that you need to apply called as ATS Live. If you apply this code in either of 2027 or 2028 courses, you are going to get maximum discounts, right? So do not forget, learn to thrive by using the code ATS Live. Now, this is the question that I wanted you to solve. This one is from 2015. Which one of the following brings out the consumer price index number for industrial workers? Please do let me know the correct answers of this question. And another question from 2017, which principle among the following was added to the directive principle of state policy by the 42nd amendment to the Constitution? Do let me know the correct answers for both of these questions in the comment section, and the ones who get it correctly would get a thumbs up from my side. Once again, you should download the notes by going to the Telegram channel ATS Live, and while downloading the notes, do not forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Okay, so this is all from my side for today. We'll see each other again tomorrow. Please have a very good night.